I'm Linda Coles, and this is Tell Us a Story. Have as my guest today Shona Lyon, an Auckland-based professional sculptor who specialises in figurative and portrait bronze sculptures. Shona's sculptures are based on the principles of sacred geometry and the classical sculptural techniques introduced to her by her mentor, international Master Sculptor Martine Vaugel. Shona was fortunate to train privately under Martine in France and will be forever grateful for her inspiration and guidance. And she also provides group workshops on sculpting and offers private one-on-one tuition. So this is going to be quite an interesting podcast today. So welcome, Shona. How are you?
Thank you, Linda. I'm well, thank you.
Well, something that I've often thought about in sculpting, I've never had a go myself, but we'll get on to sort of the intricacies of what that entails. But how did you get to where you are now? What was the journey? How did you get to fancy being a sculptor? Or was there something major happen beforehand?
Actually, I started out in corporate marketing.
Oh.
Believe it or not, and I had a couple of businesses, and I went to Chartres in France to do a course on the 7 liberal arts with Wisdom University. So when I was in Chartres in France, where the cathedral was, I looked up and there were 3,000 sculptures surrounding me, and I was just hit. That's all I can say. It was like being hit from out of the blue, and I decided to come home, sell my businesses, and become a sculptor. So it was I was 44, and it was a bit like being told that you wanted to be a ballerina or something like that. I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. So that's how it started.
So how did you find out what to do? I mean, from thinking I'm just going to go and do this, so I'm going to give my my business world up and go do this. What did you do?
Well, I started searching for some teachers, and in New Zealand I couldn't find any classical teaching of sculpting. There were a lot of pottery, and they do some sculpting in pottery, but that's kiln based, which is not the feel I wanted. I wanted to move into bronzes. So I searched the web. Thank goodness for the web.
Yeah.
And I really loved the work of Martine Vaugel. I loved her philosophies. And I think she's the only woman, I'm not sure if this is still true, but she was the only woman to have won 2 Rodin awards. So she did some amazing work. So I decided to travel to France. I have a 7-year-old son, so I had him looked after. And I travelled over there and studied privately under her, only for about 5 weeks. But I was in her house with her and the only one. So it was really full on. And she was very much an old master. You had to take your shoes off, and I had to clean up her tools, and it was very.
You were very much the student.
Very much. And I remember actually saying to her, she said, "So what do you want?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a sculptor." And she said, "Well, I can't make you a sculptor. I can teach you to sculpt, but doesn't mean you're going to be a sculptor." She was quite tough.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful experience.
And what happened there then? I mean, after that 5 weeks, were you, in inverted commas, a qualified sculptor then?
No, there is no such thing.
No. I knew he was going to say that.
So I returned to New Zealand and I started sculpting and following some of her teachings. And I also travelled back to France over the next 5 years on and off. Went to as many museums as I could. And decided where I wanted to fit in the world of sculpting. There are so many different forms of sculpting, especially contemporary, even in the classical. So I began, and I have just kept going. And then when I was starting to sculpt in New Zealand, there were other sculptors contacted me and said, "Oh, where are you getting your tools?" So my business brain kicked in.
Yeah. I can sell these.
Well, yes, I may as well. So I started doing that. And then, unfortunately, that sort of took over a little bit from my sculpting. So it's only really been in the last 2 years I've got someone in to run that side of the business, and I can now sculpt.
Concentrate
again.
on that, yeah. So, I mean, you must have a creative bone or two then in your body. I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was at school and making paper mache things on balloons and what have you. It wouldn't dawn on me to spend my life creating something physical like you do. So you've obviously got the gene as well as the want.
I wouldn't have thought so.
No?
In fact, I was thinking about it. When I was in Form 4, very long time ago, I decided for my 5th form year I wanted to do art. And I did in the 4th form, and I wasn't allowed. It was that I didn't have the ability to go on, and that sort of makes me smile now because it was such a judgment call, whereas art is so subjective.
Yes, it is. It is very much so. And you chose bronze of all mediums.
I love the traditional, but I have developed in my own way, I guess, of what I want to do with it, and I've really tried to push the boundaries of what's possible with bronze, because it is so, how do you get emotion and movement into something that's so static, like a statue? So I've used mixed mediums in with that, in with bronze, and done a few different things with it to make it quite difficult and quite different, I think.
So what I mean, I have no idea. How does bronze come to you before you start working with it?
Yeah.
Is it a liquid? Is it a rock? Is it like clay? Or
the process is massive, and most people think bronzes are expensive because of the material they're made out of, but it's actually the process. So you start and you sculpt with there's water-based clay, or there's plastilina, which is an oil-based clay. There's lots of mediums you can start with. Some people start in a wax. I use generally a water-based clay, and then once you finish the sculpture, that's moulded in a silicone rubber, which is a flexible rubber. And then a shell called a mother shell or a mantle is put around that. Then you take out this is quite long, then you take out the actual sculpture and you're left with a negative.
yeah,
And into the negative you pour wax.
right.
And you rotate it so it is a hollow wax. And then I take it to the foundry.
Right.
Because I'm not in. So they put a core in the middle of the wax, and then they put a ceramic shell with some silica so it will take heat around the outside. They burn out the wax in the middle, so you're left with a thin negative, and then they pour the molten
in.
wax, which is molten bronze, which has to go to an unbelievable heat.
So it's quite a process.
It's massive.
So it's not a case of you sitting there with your chisel and your
not
piece
that
of bronze.
sort of. Yeah, there's two sort of sculptors, and there's the takeaway method and the build up method.
Right.
So the takeaway is more your stone and things like that.
Right, and you're the add-on.
Yeah, the additive.
Excellent, very interesting. And there's a great video actually on your website, which I'm sure we'll come back to later on, that shows you, which is why I asked the question, because it looked like clay. Obviously, it was.
Yeah, it was.
That's what it was.
Yeah. You'll see it all in my hair and my face.
So you have a saying, I want my art to engage with people's hearts before their brains. What's the motivation behind that?
I think a lot of schools are teaching conceptual art, which I think is wonderful, but that goes to your brain before your heart. So you have to understand what they're trying to say. You have to write these pieces about what you are trying to get over. For me, I want to hit people in the heart first, and then for them to maybe think about what it says to them, or what I'm trying to say. But even if it just hits them in the heart, that's the key for me.
And for those of you listening thinking, I'm not sure quite where she's coming from then, if you have a look at Shona's website, there's a couple of pieces on there. One in particular that I looked at yesterday, the African child, the feeding station. So let's jump ahead a little bit because it's pretty provocative, isn't it? That
It is,
you either
yeah.
love it or you love it, but you're not quite sure about it somehow. Well, that's how I felt anyway. I was drawn to looking at it thinking, whoa, and a bit of whoa and a bit of wow, and the two are different. So tell us the inspiration behind that. Where did that come from?
It was Kevin, I think it was Carter, I'm trying to think of his name. He was a photographer and he took a photo of a African child on its way to a feeding station. They originally thought it was a girl, but apparently it turned out to be a boy. But behind the child collapsed forward and there was a vulture standing but waiting for the child to die. And sadly, there was a lot. He won the Pulitzer for the photography, but sadly, a lot of people were saying, well, he should have intervened, and other people said he shouldn't. And 6 months later, he killed himself. So obviously, it was a traumatic experience for him, let alone the child. So that was the inspiration. When I sculpted her, I sculpted her in 24 hours, just straight. I didn't have water. I was in a sort of meditation mode, and I cried a lot of the time because it felt like I was bringing her into the world, and that was not what I was, wanting to do. But I think sometimes it's easy to look away and become apathetic.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do need a reminder that there are things we can do to help. And sometimes, we need that reminder. So that's where it's coming from.
Yeah. Well, I encourage everybody to have a look at that on the website, and we'll come back to a few more bits on there of other pieces, Icarus as well. So let's go back to you a little bit more and your involvement with animals and protests in the past.
Right.
What have you been up to?
It's the same sort of thing, I guess. It's about caring that we are all one is a strong belief I have, and there's some horrendous things going on with animals at the moment, and canned lion hunting is one of those, and that is where there are more lions in captivity than there are in the wild. They breed them. To first of all, they start as a petting lion, so volunteers think they're helping the lions.
Yeah.
You obviously know about this.
I do. Yeah. So they're bred for one reason only, and that's for the hunter to come into an enclosed area and hunt them.
And often it's baited. There's a bait put out for them. They're in a very enclosed area. They're not shot or killed humanely at all because they don't want to destroy the pelt.
Yeah.
It really is like a white lion would sell for $150,000.
Wow.
So a lot of people, I mean, I find it totally inhumane. And, now they're even doing it with giraffes. And, it's like, what are we doing? What? So you can have a giraffe head on your wall?
Yeah.
Very sad. So I started the protest here. It was a worldwide protest, but I organised it for New Zealand.
And was that when I think it's Australia that started banning the import of lions' heads and big game hunting trophies? Was that part of it, or
it became part of it? Donna Lee Patman, who is the founder of Flow for the Love of Wildlife, she actually worked with Jonathan Hunt and got that through sorry, it wasn't Jonathan Hunt, it was Greg Hunt, I think, sorry. Got that through Parliament, so they now have banned that. So she got an Order of Merit for that. She does some amazing work with not just lions, but with rhinos and elephants, and they're trying to get a ban through for that as well.
So you've actually put the two together,
yes.
And with your exhibition. Tell us
Yes.
about your exhibition and how that's going to help conservation.
Well, there's a few pieces in the exhibition that, one of the things I sincerely believe is that if people utilise an animal, for any monetary gain. They need to give back to that well-being of that animal through whatever means. So whenever I've utilised an animal, I have decided to give back to the well-being of that animal. I would love at some stage, I was going to start an organisation called Stand By Your Brand. I would love to see corporates start standing by the animal they use, even down to cars. Ferrari's the horse, you've got Holden, the lion.
Jaguar.
Yeah, and people use that because they want to the animal to give them an image for their product.
Yeah.
And they've got to give back because otherwise we won't have them. So yes, so I've decided. So the money, $1,000 from every lion. It goes to For the Love of Wildlife, which is Donald Lee Patman's charity.
Yeah.
And that piece is called Forgive Them, They Know Not What They Do. And that's because of if you see the piece, the lion is forgiving. It's more of a sort of, it's about the lion, but it's a spiritual piece in a way. It's the capacity for animals to forgive and forget and love beyond the cruelty. So.
And when is the exhibition?
The exhibition opening's on June the 14th from 6
not
till
far
9, and then it runs for 2 weeks after that.
And where is it? Where will you?
It's in Taylor's Road in Morningside or St Luke's. It's between the French Art Shop and Briscoe's.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of your other pieces. But actually, before we do that, where do you get all your inspiration from? Do you sort of wake up one day and think, I really should do that, or something stirred me and I want to create one of those?
Sometimes it comes through my mind. I've got one saying, which is, if my ego asks me to do a sculpt, it won't be very good.
Right.
And that's exactly true. There may be a flicker or dreams, or sometimes I meditate and before I sculpt. So there's nothing, and then something comes through, and that's what it feels like. It comes through me. It's not of me.
Right. So that's. I'm just trying to think about my own creative. Where I get inspiration from the books, etc., that I write. And when we were just sat outside before we came into the studio, you were strumming the guitar while
yeah.
engineer and talking about things. So, your brain must be going all the time.
Oh yeah.
Do you get any sleep?
Problem. No, not at the moment. But that's why meditation's good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the thing with meditation always is when you're the busiest, it's the first thing to go, and
it is.
That makes it a bit hard. But sometimes you need to just keep going.
You do. What are you working on at the moment? Anything in particular that you can share?
I'm doing a piece at the moment, which is a life-size torso.
Wow.
It's actually moulded, but it's made out of a stone, and it has cracks in it. And it's actually, we're going to be giving some money to breast cancer. Right. So it's got a light on the inside of it. So through the cracks comes this amazing light, and it's about the beauty that's inside of us. So when people have breast cancer and they have operations and things, often we relate, or often I have a lot of friends who have gone through that process, and I think they feel no longer beautiful or they're scarred. And so this piece is about, actually, it is the cracks or the scars, if you like, that let the light out, the beauty out. They're still beautiful. So
I've been there myself, so I can associate with what you're saying there.
Right.
So you've also done some workshops in the past, and you've got this dream for a foundation, dedicated school of sculpture, because there isn't really one in New Zealand, is there?
No, there isn't. We have some amazing schools, Elam, of course, and Whitecliff and places like that, and we have animation schools, but we don't have the classical sculpture school here at all. And in fact, we have quite a few interns who come from Elam or Whitecliff, and to learn the processes of sculpting, because they're not actually taught that in the classes.
And of course, you learnt from the best.
Yes. Yes. I was very lucky. Yeah.
So have you got any workshops coming up at all? Well, are you obviously busy with your exhibition?
We will have after the exhibition, so probably in August, but we do have an online presence that we're trying to get out to people because they can't always be in Auckland.
Yeah, no.
So we offer a free class on Facebook called Free Sculpting Online, and we also have a Facebook page called Sculpt, which offers advice and things like that. It hasn't been as active recently because I've been doing the exhibition, but it is there.
Time consuming.
Yes.
So do you listen to music, or is it a quiet space while you're working?
Quiet space before, so I tend to get into a meditation beforehand, and then I turn up the music, and usually opera.
Oh, right.
Because generally it's Italian or a language I don't understand, which means my mind isn't engaged.
Right.
And that's really important.
You can just concentrate on what you're doing.
Yeah, it's just flowing through the hands rather than... Because if I play music that has English, then I'm listening to the words.
And singing.
Yeah, definitely singing. Neighbours don't appreciate that too much. Then the dogs start howling.
So is everything ready for your exhibition? Are all the pieces, or are you...
We're picking up the last 10 today from the foundry, and I've still got about 5 pieces, one big piece that I'm working all night towards. Yeah, so hopefully they'll all make it.
All right. And is there one thing that you would like to do, that you would like to create in your lifetime? Is there a life-size giraffe, or I don't know? Is there something
that
actually,
which is quite unusual because I'm not religious as such, but I think I'd love to do a full body of Christ,
right?
Which is I don't know where that comes from, but I think it's I love archetypes, and I think it's the archetype of that has so much in it, of forgiveness, of pain, so that's something I would love
And again,
to do.
that would be quite provocative to a lot of people, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
there's quite a few things I like to do which could be a bit provocative to people.
I quite like the Icarus that you've got on your website.
Oh,
where did Icarus come from?
I love the myths. I read quite a bit, or have done, and watched videos from Joseph Campbell, and I love his work. So he basically, I'm not sure if you know him, but he has gone out to all the religions, studied all the myths from around the world, and has brought together this compilation of the patterns in all the myths. So basically they're all the same. You've got the heroes, you've got the villains, you've got and that they all relate back to ourselves. So they're archetypes for us to live by, and they reflect parts of us back to ourselves that we can learn from. So that's where Icarus came from. I love the Greek myths. And one of the important things for me in my sculpture is to capture moments in time. So the story of Icarus, of course, is that the wings melt and he falls to the ground. And there's a couple of different endings to that. But I wanted to concentrate on the moment that he lost his head, if you like, and he was in that moment of soaring, and that's why he just continued to the sun, because it's in that moment that nothing else exists.
Yeah, he was on a mission.
Yeah, so I wanted to capture that.
I think you did. So what would you give, one piece of advice for someone that's looking to do something so creative like you spend your life doing? What would that one piece of advice be?
Just go for it. Like, everything's possible. There's so many tools out there to help people. Everything's possible. So, just go for it. Just do it.
Sound advice. So tell us again where your exhibition is and when, and your website, so that people can go and have a look at the African child at the feeding station in Icarus and many more.
Yeah.
They can't get to the exhibition.
Wonderful. We are in Taylor's Road, number 16. We're between the French Art Shop and Briscoe's. It's actually called Sam's, which is sculpture moulding.
Right.
But that's where the exhibition's going to be held. We've cleaned it out. And my website is easy, www.shonalyon.co.nz.
Lyon.
Lyon, yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks ever so much for coming in today, Shona. It's been fascinating talking to you and learning all about bronze sculptures and the exhibition. Sounds great. And I encourage everybody to go and have a look at the website, Shona Lyon, lyon.co.nz. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's been a pleasure.
Well,
Thank
good luck.
you.
Good luck for the exhibition.
Thanks. Many thanks.
You've been listening to Tell Us a Story. Why not subscribe or rate us next time you're on iTunes?